What if a single moment could transform your entire relationship with God? What if that moment came to a 15-year-old boy who would become the patron saint of the internet? Today, we uncover the extraordinary vision that forever altered the heart of Carlo Acutis, a vision so powerful, it changed not only his life but continues to inspire millions worldwide. If this story moves you, hit that like button, subscribe for more inspiring Catholic content, and ring the notification bell because what we're about to share will challenge everything you think you know about modern sainthood. The year was 2006. Carlo Acutis was just 15 years old, living in Milan with his family. To the outside world, he appeared to be an ordinary teenager with an extraordinary gift for technology. He spent countless hours creating websites, designing computer programs, and helping his friends with their digital projects. But something was stirring within Carlo's heart, something that would soon manifest in a way that no one could have predicted. The first signs appeared during his regular visits to the local parish church. Father Antonio, his spiritual director, noticed that Carlo had begun spending longer periods in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. The young man would arrive early for Mass and remain long after others had departed. His mother, Antonia, observed this change with both wonder and concern. What was drawing her son so deeply into these moments of silence? Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. It wasn't a dramatic apparition like those at Fatima or Lourdes. It wasn't a voice from heaven that shook the foundations of the earth. Instead, it was something far more subtle, yet infinitely more transformative. During one of his regular visits to the church, as Carlo knelt before the tabernacle, he experienced what he would later describe as a profound awareness of Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. But this wasn't merely an intellectual understanding. Something extraordinary happened that day that would reshape everything Carlo thought he knew about faith, about God, and about his own purpose in life. Are you still with me? Drop a comment below telling us about a time when you felt God's presence in your own life, because what happened next will show you just how accessible divine encounters truly are. The vision wasn't filled with brilliant lights or angelic choirs. Instead, Carlo described feeling as though Jesus was speaking directly to his heart, not in words but in a language deeper than human speech. In that moment, he understood with crystal clarity that every consecrated host contained the living Christ. This wasn't theological knowledge learned from books or sermons. This was direct personal revelation that burned itself into the very core of his being. What makes Carlo's experience even more remarkable is what happened immediately afterward. Rather than keeping this incredible encounter to himself, he felt an overwhelming urge to share this reality with others. But how do you convince a generation raised on smartphones and social media that an ancient ritual holds the key to everything they're searching for? Here's where Carlo's genius truly shines through. He realized that his technological skills weren't separate from his faith. They were the very tools God had given him to spread this message. Within weeks of his vision, Carlo began working on what would become his greatest project, a comprehensive website documenting Eucharistic miracles from around the world. But this wasn't just any website. It was a digital cathedral, a virtual space where the sacred and the modern would meet in perfect harmony. Think about this for a moment. While other teenagers were using technology for entertainment and social connection, Carlo was using it to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. His vision had shown him something that most adults struggle to understand: that God speaks the language of every generation, and in the 21st century, that language often flows through fiber optic cables and wireless signals. The deeper we dive into Carlo's story, the more we discover that his vision was just the beginning. What followed was a complete transformation of how he approached every aspect of his life. His friends noticed that he spoke about the Eucharist with an intensity and joy that was infectious. His family watched as their son began waking up earlier each morning, not to play video games or check social media, but to attend daily Mass. But here's what's truly fascinating about Carlo's transformation. He didn't become withdrawn or overly pious. Instead, he became more engaged with the world around him. The vision had given him a lens through which to see everything differently. Every person he met was someone loved by Christ. Every challenge he faced was an opportunity to grow closer to God. Every moment of his life became a chance to witness to the reality he had experienced in that church. If you're finding this story as compelling as we are, make sure to share it with someone who needs to hear about God's love today, because what we're about to reveal about Carlo's mission will show you exactly why Pope Francis called him a model for young people in the digital age. Carlo's website project became an obsession in the best possible way. He spent months researching Eucharistic miracles corresponding with churches around the world and carefully documenting each supernatural event. The miracle of Lanciano, where consecrated bread and wine literally transformed into human flesh and blood in the 8th century. The miracle of Buenos Aires, where a discarded host began bleeding in 1996. Story after story of God's presence breaking through into our physical world in the most tangible way possible. But Carlo didn't just collect these stories. He presented them with the eye of a true digital native. High-resolution photographs, detailed historical context, scientific analysis, and compelling narratives that made each miracle come alive for modern readers. He understood something that many church leaders were still struggling with, that young people weren't rejecting faith because they couldn't believe in miracles, but because no one had shown them the evidence that these miracles were real. As his website grew, something unexpected began happening. Emails started pouring in from around the world. Young people who had stumbled across his site were writing to tell him how it had changed their perspective on faith. Adults who had fallen away from the church were returning after seeing the documented proof of God's continued presence in the world. Priests were using Carlo's research in their homilies and Bible studies. The 15-year-old boy from Milan had become an unlikely evangelist, reaching more souls through his computer screen than most missionaries reach in a lifetime of service. But the cost of this mission was higher than anyone realized at the time. The intensity of Carlo's focus on his project, combined with his increasing devotion to daily Mass and prayer, was taking a toll on his young body. This is where Carlo's story takes a turn that will challenge everything you think you know about God's will and human suffering. Comment below if you've ever struggled to understand why good people face difficult challenges, because Carlo's response to his upcoming trial will transform how you think about adversity. In early 2006, just months after his transformative vision, Carlo began experiencing fatigue that couldn't be explained by his busy schedule. His mother initially attributed it to his intense focus on his website project and his commitment to daily Mass. But as the weeks passed, the exhaustion deepened and other symptoms began to appear. Headaches that wouldn't respond to medication, a loss of appetite that concerned his family, weakness that seemed to come from nowhere. The diagnosis, when it finally came, hit the Acutis family like a thunderbolt. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, cancer of the blood. The doctors explained that this aggressive form of the disease was particularly challenging in teenagers and that treatment would need to begin immediately. For most 15-year-olds, such news would have been devastating. For Carlo, it became another opportunity to live out the reality of his vision. Here's what makes Carlo's response to his illness so extraordinary. Instead of asking, "Why me?" or becoming bitter about his circumstances, he saw his suffering as a chance to unite himself more closely with Christ. The same Jesus who had revealed himself so powerfully in the Eucharist was also the Jesus who had suffered on the cross. If Carlo truly wanted to follow Christ completely, then he would need to embrace not just the joy of communion, but also the pain of crucifixion. This perspective transformed how Carlo approached his treatment. While undergoing chemotherapy, he continued working on his website whenever he had strength. During long hospital stays, he would arrange for priests to bring him communion, maintaining the daily practice that had become the center of his life since his vision. He spoke with other young patients about faith, sharing his story and his research with anyone who would listen. But Carlo's family noticed something even more remarkable. His illness seemed to deepen rather than diminish the joy that had characterized his personality since his transformative experience in the church. He spoke about offering his suffering for the salvation of souls, particularly for young people who had lost their way. He talked about his cancer as a gift that allowed him to participate in Christ's redemptive work in a unique and powerful way. As his condition worsened, Carlo made a request that revealed the true depth of his transformation. He asked his parents to ensure that his website would continue to be available after his death, and that his research on Eucharistic miracles would be shared as widely as possible. This wasn't the request of a teenager afraid of being forgotten. This was the final act of someone who had encountered the eternal and wanted to help others find that same encounter. The end came quickly. On October 12, 2006, just 9 months after his initial diagnosis, Carlo Acutis passed away. He was 15 years old. His last words, spoken to his mother, were about his desire to go to Jesus. The boy who had experienced such a powerful vision of Christ's presence in the Eucharist was finally going to meet his Lord face to face. If you've been moved by Carlo's story so far, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. But don't stop there. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of faith in the face of suffering. Because what happened after Carlo's death proves that his vision wasn't just personal revelation, but a prophetic call that continues to transform lives around the world. The immediate aftermath of Carlo's death seemed to confirm what many had suspected during his illness. This was no ordinary teenager. Stories began circulating about his extraordinary patience during treatment, his continued joy despite his pain, and his persistent focus on others rather than himself. Doctors and nurses who had cared for him spoke about his unusual maturity and the sense of peace that seemed to surround him even in his final days. But it was Carlo's continuing influence that truly testified to the power of his vision. His website, maintained by his family and a growing network of supporters, began reaching an even wider audience. The documentation of Eucharistic miracles that he had compiled became a resource used by Catholic educators, evangelists, and spiritual directors around the world. Young people who had never heard of Carlo Acutis were discovering his research and experiencing their own encounters with Christ in the Eucharist. More remarkably, reports began coming in of extraordinary events connected to prayers for Carlo's intercession, healings that doctors couldn't explain, conversions that seemed to happen overnight, families reconciled after years of division. These weren't just coincidences or wishful thinking, they were documented cases that would eventually form the foundation for Carlo's beatification process. The Catholic Church, normally cautious about recognizing modern saints, moved with unusual speed in investigating Carlo's life and the miracles attributed to his intercession. The same institution that takes decades to canonize most saints opened Carlo's cause for sainthood just 7 years after his death. This acceleration wasn't due to political pressure or popular demand. It was recognition that something extraordinary had touched this young man's life, and that his influence was continuing to grow in ways that defied natural explanation. In 2020, just 14 years after his death, Carlo Acutis was beatified by Pope Francis. The ceremony, held in Assisi, drew thousands of young pilgrims from around the world. Many of them had discovered Carlo's story through social media and digital platforms, the very tools he had used to spread his message about the Eucharist. The patron saint of the internet had been officially recognized by the Church, and his vision was being validated by the institution he had served so faithfully. But here's what makes Carlo's beatification even more significant. The miracle that sealed his path to sainthood involved the healing of a young Brazilian boy who suffered from a rare pancreatic disorder. The child's family had prayed to Carlo for intercession, and medical professionals confirmed that his complete recovery had no natural explanation. A teenager who had died of cancer had become the instrument of healing for another young person facing life-threatening illness. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced what you would call a miracle in your own life? Because Carlo's story reminds us that God is still working supernatural wonders in our world today, often through the intercession of those who learn to see his presence everywhere. The legacy of Carlo's vision extends far beyond his personal sanctity. His approach to using technology for evangelization has inspired countless other young Catholics to see their digital skills as tools for ministry. Youth groups around the world now create websites, apps, and social media content designed to share the gospel with their generation. Seminary students study Carlo's methods as examples of effective modern evangelization. Parish priests use his research on Eucharistic miracles to help their congregations develop deeper appreciation for the Mass. Perhaps most importantly, Carlo's story has given young people a model of sainthood that feels accessible and relevant. He wasn't a mystic who withdrew from the world, or a martyr who died for refusing to renounce his faith. He was a teenager who discovered God's presence in the ordinary aspects of Catholic life and used his everyday talents to share that discovery with others. His sanctity grew out of daily Mass attendance, regular confession, and genuine care for the people around him. The vision that changed Carlo's life continues to change lives today. Young people who learn about his experience often report their own increased awareness of Christ's presence in the Eucharist. Adults who had grown comfortable with routine participation in Mass find themselves approaching communion with renewed reverence and expectation. Families that had drifted away from regular church attendance return after hearing Carlo's story and visiting his website. This ongoing influence reveals something crucial about the nature of authentic religious experience. Carlo's vision wasn't meant just for him. It was meant to be shared, multiplied, and passed on to others who were searching for evidence of God's presence in their own lives. The same Christ who revealed himself to a 15-year-old boy in Milan continues to reveal himself to anyone willing to approach the Eucharist with open hearts and genuine faith. As we near the end of our time together today, it's worth reflecting on what Carlo's story means for each of us. His vision didn't make him superhuman or exempt from the struggles that face every person who tries to live faithfully. He still dealt with the normal challenges of adolescence, the pressure of school, and the complications of family life. His illness brought real pain and genuine sorrow to him and his loved ones. What made Carlo extraordinary was his response to both the divine encounter and the human suffering that shaped his short life. He chose to see God's presence everywhere, in the Eucharist, in other people, in his technological abilities, and even in his cancer. This perspective transformed every aspect of his existence from routine obligation into opportunity for deeper communion with Christ. The same choice is available to each of us. We may not experience visions or work miracles, but we can choose to approach our daily lives with the same expectant faith that characterized Carlo's final years. We can look for God's presence in the ordinary moments of our existence. We can use our talents, whatever they might be, as tools for sharing the gospel with others. We can face our difficulties with the confidence that comes from knowing we are loved by the same Christ who reveals himself in every consecrated host. Carlo's vision changed him forever because he allowed it to change him. He didn't dismiss the experience as imagination or keep it locked away as a private treasure. He let that encounter with divine love reshape his priorities, redirect his energies, and redefine his purpose. The result was a life that continues to inspire and transform others more than 15 years after his death. Before you leave us today, take a moment to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when we release new content about saints, miracles, and the ways God continues to work in our modern world. Share this video with someone who might be encouraged by Carlo's story, and don't forget to leave us a comment telling us how this remarkable young man's example has touched your own heart. The vision that changed Carlo Acutis forever wasn't just a supernatural experience that happened to one remarkable teenager. It was an invitation extended to all of us, an invitation to recognize Christ's real presence in the Eucharist, to use our gifts for God's glory, and to live each day with the joy and purpose that come from knowing we are infinitely loved. Carlo accepted that invitation completely, and his life became a beacon of hope for young people around the world. The question that remains for each of us is simple. Will we accept that same invitation? Will we allow our own encounters with God, however they might come, to transform us the way Carlo's vision transformed him? The choice is ours, but the same Christ who revealed himself to a 15-year-old computer enthusiast in Milan is waiting to reveal himself to us as well. All we need to do is approach him with open hearts and genuine faith, just as Carlo did on that day that changed everything forever.